Imagine for a second having this power, like commanding extreme cold, not just for a day, but using it to keep food perfectly fresh for months.
Yeah, sounds almost like magic, doesn't it? But that core idea, holding on to freshness over time, that became real thanks to, well, one really persistent guy, Clarence Birdseye.
Exactly. And his story, it's not just about, frozen peas. It's really about curiosity, bouncing back when things go wrong, and just pushing boundaries.
And for you listening, especially if you like getting to grips with big ideas quickly, Birdseye's whole journey is, well, it's fascinating. It's more than just the history of frozen food.
Right.
It's about how watching closely and then just experimenting relentlessly can actually change everything. We're going to trace that path.
Yeah, look at the key moments and pull out what we can learn about how progress, how it actually happens. So our goal here in this deep dive is really to understand how the frozen food we all know came about, specifically through Birdseye's life. What were the breakthroughs? What drove him? And, what are the bigger takeaways?
Okay, so where did it all start? What was the initial spark?
Well, it kicked off somewhere totally different. Labrador.
Labrador, right. Think ice, snow, a place where survival means really knowing your environment.
Okay.
It's there that a young Birdseye sees the Inuit people, and he witnesses how they use that intense Arctic cold to keep food. It's quite a scene.
I bet.
Yeah, imagine seeing them pull fish out of the ice, maybe fish caught months ago, and it thaws out tasting, well, almost perfectly fresh, like it was just caught.
Wow, that deep freeze just locking everything in instantly.
Yeah.
For months. That's pretty powerful when you think about that natural process.
It really is. And, lots of people might have just thought, interesting, and moved on.
Right. An Arctic curiosity.
Exactly. But Birdseye, he saw something fundamental there. He started asking why. Why did that super fast freezing work so well? What was it about the speed?
The why.
That observation, that question, that was the seed. The very beginning of an idea that honestly changed how the entire world eats.
Okay, so he sees this incredible natural process, has this insight, and then he comes back to the U.S. How does he even start trying to, recreate the Arctic in, say, New Jersey?
Well, it definitely wasn't a smooth transition. He came back with the concept, but almost no money. The story goes he had just, $7?
$7?
Really? Yeah, just $7. And with that, he scrapes together some basic gear, an electric fan, ice, salt, basic stuff.
Wow.
He even convinced someone to let him use a corner of their ice house for his experiments, basically trying to mimic Arctic conditions with, whatever he could find.
Okay, so he's experimenting, and this leads to his first company, right? Birdseye Seafoods, Inc. But it didn't work out.
No, it failed. Pretty hard, actually.
Oh, what went wrong?
A couple of big things. First, people were really skeptical about frozen food back then. The existing stuff, cold storage, was slow frozen and often pretty poor quality.
So frozen had a bad reputation.
Exactly. People just didn't believe his fish could be good. Plus, the whole infrastructure wasn't there. Refrigerated transport, freezers in stores, freezers in homes. None of that really existed yet.
So the market just wasn't ready, even if the idea was good.
Pretty much. It must have been incredibly frustrating.
Oh, I can imagine. You have this vision, you pour everything into it with hardly any resources, and then rejection, doubt. It shows you how tough innovation can be.
It really does. But what's amazing is it didn't stop him. That failure just made him more determined, it seems. He learned from it, rethought things.
And started again.
Founded a new company, General Seafoods Corporation, and this time he'd figured some things out.
Okay, so this is where the real breakthrough happens. The quick freeze method. What was different this time?
The key was speed, real speed. He developed the system where food, fish, vegetables, whatever, was packed into waxed cardboard boxes.
Right.
And then these boxes were pressed tightly between super cold metal plates under pressure.
The pressure helps with contact.
Exactly. Consistent, fast freezing. By freezing it really quickly, he stopped those big, damaging ice crystals from forming inside the food.
The ones that ruin the texture and flavor when it thaws.
Precisely. Those large crystals puncture the cell walls. Quick freezing makes tiny crystals, preserving the food's quality, flavor, texture, even nutrients much, much better.
Got it. So it's not just cold, it's fast cold. And that term he coined, quick freeze, that really says it all, doesn't it?
It does. It captured the essence. But, it wasn't just about the tech. He still had a huge job convincing people, consumers, the food industry. They were still wary. He had to educate them.
But eventually, it clicked. Big time. The text mentions this huge sale in 1929. His patents, the company, sold for $22 million.
That's $22 million. To the Postum Company, which became General Foods later on. I mean, that's an astronomical sum for that era, especially right before the Great Depression hit.
Incredible. It just shows how much potential they saw in it.
Oh, absolutely. And that sale, that was the real turning point. It pushed frozen food into the mainstream, and the impact was, well, massive.
How so?
Think about it. Suddenly, you could get all sorts of foods year-round, pretty much anywhere in the U.S., fruits, vegetables out of season. It changed diets, improved access to nutrition.
Right. No longer just relying on canning or local seasonal stuff.
Exactly. And it boosted industries like fishing, opening up markets deep inland that were impossible to reach before because fish spoiled so fast. It basically built the foundation for the huge global frozen food industry we have today.
Yeah, you walk down the freezer aisle now and just take it all for granted, don't you? That access to food from everywhere, anytime, it's easy to forget how revolutionary that was.
It really is. His work is a huge part of why your freezer looks the way it does.
Now, there's another layer to this story that the text brings up, something about the origins of the technique itself.
Yes, and this is really important. The text calls it the shadows beneath the ice. While Birdseye absolutely developed the industrial process, the machinery, the commercial application, the core principle of flash freezing food and extreme cold to preserve it. That wasn't entirely new.
Where did it come from, then?
It was essentially a traditional practice of the Inuit people back in Labrador, the very people he observed all those years ago. It was knowledge developed over generations, understanding their environment.
Ah, okay. So he observed their traditional method, realized its potential, and then figured out how to scale it up technologically and commercially.
That's a good way to put it. He deserves huge credit for the innovation, the industrialization, the vision to make it widely available. But the initial spark, that fundamental insight, came from observing Inuit knowledge.
It definitely adds an important dimension, doesn't it? It makes you think about where ideas come from, how innovation often builds on existing wisdom, and, well, acknowledging those sources.
It does. It highlights that interplay. And while Birdseye got the fame and fortune, the Inuit contribution often gets overlooked in the popular story.
Right. Still, even with that complexity, the text really emphasizes Birdseye's own qualities. That resilience we talked about, his incredible curiosity. Apparently, he had almost 300 patents in total, not just for food.
That's right. He was inventing all sorts of things. His mind was clearly always working, always looking for problems to solve. But maybe his greatest invention, as the text kind of suggests, was his mindset.
What do you mean?
The idea that, the impossible is simply the untried. He hit wall after wall, lack of money, business failure, public doubt, but he just kept pushing.
That really drives home that universal lesson point, doesn't it? Seeing potential where others see roadblocks, being open enough to learn from unexpected places, like the Inuit.
And just having that grit to persevere when things get tough, again and again.
It makes you reflect personally, like, what challenges are you facing that might actually hold an opportunity? What wisdom have you maybe overlooked because it didn't come from a familiar source?
Exactly. His story, fundamentally, is about that power of human ingenuity, sparked by curiosity, but really fueled by sheer persistence, and recognizing value, even if it's found, out there on the ice.
So wrapping up this deep dive, it feels like the core message isn't just about fish sticks. It's about courage, maybe a bit of humility in recognizing where ideas come from, and that incredible power of just not giving up.
Well said. And it leaves you, the listener, with something to think about, right? The world's full of challenges, but also opportunities. Birdseye's legacy kind of nudges us to stay curious, value inspiration wherever we find it, and keep going when things seem difficult.
Yeah, dare to see what others overlook. Dare to try what seems daunting. Like the text says, maybe the next big thing is waiting out there on what looks like thin ice.
The future belongs to those willing to take that step, risk the setback, and, importantly, honor the wisdom that helps light the way. The potential's always out there.